I'm Rachel Lawson, 36 years old, and I was still holding the Thanksgiving turkey when my father looked straight at me and said, "All you do is take, you've never given this family anything." The clatter of silverware didn't stop. My mother kept her eyes on her plate. My sister sipped her wine. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just turned and walked out of the room, my hands still warm from the roasting pan, and no one followed me. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever walked away from people who never noticed you were the one holding everything together. I was born in a small town in Ohio just outside Dayton. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. My parents, Robert and Marlene, worked hard, Dad in insurance, Mom at a local dental office, and they always made a point to say that family came first. My younger sister, April, was the one everyone noticed. Bright smile, straight A's, class president, homecoming queen, she made people look. And they did. I was the quiet one, the steady one. From the time I was old enough to fold laundry and set the table, I knew my role. Help out, stay out of trouble, and make things easier. I got good at reading the room, stepping in before things broke. If April forgot her lunch, I'd drive it over. If Mom was tired, I'd start dinner without being asked. I didn't expect applause. I didn't even expect thanks. That's just what we did. That's what being a good daughter meant. When I got older, I left town for college on a scholarship and worked nights at the campus library. I didn't want to ask for help, not even when I needed it. After graduation, I moved to Cincinnati, landed a job in logistics, and worked my way up until I had a corner office and a view. I didn't talk about it much at home. It felt like bragging. But at some point, quietly, without even noticing, I became the one they called when things went sideways. April needed help covering tuition during her last semester. I sent a check. When Mom's car broke down, I wired the money the same day. And when Dad hinted that the lake house might be too expensive to keep unless someone stepped in, I stepped in. No questions asked. I told myself I was being supportive, doing the right thing. I didn't realize until that Thanksgiving dinner that to them, none of it counted. And that moment with my hands still smelling of rosemary and butter was when something inside me stopped bending. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't cry in the car. I just drove hands steady on the wheel, windows cracked, letting the cold air wash through the silence. There was no music, no thoughts racing through my head, just a quiet I hadn't felt in years, an emptiness that wasn't sadness exactly, but something heavier, something final. Back at my apartment, I took off my shoes and left them by the door. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through messages, because deep down, I already knew there wouldn't be any. I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and stayed like that until the sun came up. The next morning, I opened my laptop. First, I paused the tuition autopay I'd been sending directly to April's university account. Then the rent transfer for her off-campus apartment canceled. The credit card my mother used for emergencies disabled. And the automatic payment on the lake house utilities gone. I moved through each step slowly, carefully, like I was unpacking a suitcase I hadn't realized I'd been carrying all this time. It wasn't about cutting them off. It wasn't about punishing anyone. I just couldn't keep pretending I wasn't exhausted. 3 days passed. Not a single call, no text, no missed message. At first I wondered if maybe they hadn't noticed. Maybe it wasn't real yet, but on the 7th day, the silence broke. It started with April. Her first message was light, almost playful. "Hey, weird question. Did something happen with the tuition account?" Then a few hours later, the school says the payment didn't go through. "I'm going to lose my spot. Can you check it?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing. Thought I never gave you anything. I hit send, turned off my phone again. That one line was enough. An hour later, the calls started. 2 from Mom, 1 from Dad. Then 4 more from numbers I didn't recognize, April's friends, maybe her boyfriend. A voicemail from Dad came in last. I didn't press play right away. I just sat there holding the phone in my palm like it weighed more than it should. When I finally listened, his voice came through sharp and clipped. "This little stunt of yours isn't funny. Your sister's future is on the line. You think this is how family acts." I didn't cry. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because after all these years, he still didn't see it. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was how invisible I'd been while giving it. All those years, I showed up without being asked, paid without being thanked. And now that I'd stopped suddenly, I was the problem. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the balcony wrapped in a sweater watching the city lights flicker. It was the first time I'd truly let myself wonder what would happen if I never went back. If I never picked up the pieces this time. By the end of the second week, the panic had started to spread. I hadn't said anything. I hadn't replied. But Claire, my cousin on Mom's side, sent me a message. "Are you okay? Your mom called mine. She says you've abandoned the family." I didn't answer right away. I read the word abandoned again and again until it stopped making sense. I hadn't walked away from them. I'd just stopped financing the illusion. Claire followed up a few minutes later. "I've seen how they treat you. You don't owe them anything, Rachel." Those words landed in a way I didn't expect. Claire had always been in the background, too. Quiet at family gatherings, helpful, never the one anyone made a fuss over, but she saw it. That weekend I did something small. I went to the farmer's market down the street. I bought tulips. Not for anyone else, just for the windowsill. I took a long walk in the park and didn't check my phone once. And that night I cooked dinner just one serving and ate it with the television off. No distractions, no noise, just me, my thoughts, and the sound of a fork on a plate. Meanwhile, things at home were unraveling. Claire told me Dad had missed a payment on the second mortgage. I didn't even know they had a second mortgage. Mom had been calling relatives asking for short-term help. April had already dropped one class blaming unexpected financial stress. And through it all, not one person reached out to ask how I was. Not one apology, just more spiraling, more blame. They said I vanished, that I turned cold, that I was being selfish. No one talked about the years I stepped in quietly, the tuition I paid, the kitchen remodel, the lake house repairs. They only noticed what I stopped doing, not what I had done. That's the thing about being the quiet one in a family. They don't hear you until the noise stops, and by then, it's usually too late. I hadn't looked at the lake house paperwork in years. Back when Dad first mentioned the mortgage getting tight, I'd stepped in without thinking. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they caught up. I remember him saying something about how it would stay in the family if I helped out. There was never any talk about ownership or titles. I paid because they asked, because I could. But after the silence stretched on, after the tuition messages stopped and the calls dried up, I started wondering what had actually been mine in all those years. One afternoon, I pulled up the county records site. It took a few clicks. My name popped up right away, full legal owner, no co-signer, no family trust. Just me. I leaned back in the chair, hands still on the keyboard. I must have stared at the screen for 5 minutes, reading the words over again. The mortgage, the taxes, the deed, it was all in my name. They'd put it that way to get a better interest rate, to simplify the paperwork. I remembered the emails now, the conversations where Mom called it your investment and said things like, "We'll figure it out down the line." But down the line never came. I paid the bills. They made the memories. That night, I reached out to Daniel, a lawyer Claire once mentioned, when she refinanced her condo. He was quiet on the phone, professional. I sent him every document I had, years of statements, emails, payment logs. His response came back just hours later. "You can sell this anytime you want, Rachel. You're the only one who can." He wasn't pushing, he just stated the facts. I booked a flight the next morning, one way. I didn't tell Claire, I didn't tell anyone. I used my middle name on the ticket just to avoid a scene at the gate in case someone had flagged my travel alerts through the airline rewards. I packed light, just a carry-on and a manila folder with everything Daniel might need. It was early fall when I arrived Ohio, already sliding into that in-between season where the trees start to lose their shape, and the mornings carry that brittle kind of cold. The lake house sat at the end of a long gravel road tucked between two rows of thinning maple trees. The siding was chipped, one shutter hung slightly crooked, but the front porch swing was still there, same cushion, same quiet creak in the wind. I used the key they'd never asked for back. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The kitchen light worked, but one of the hallway bulbs flickered. I walked through the rooms slowly noting everything. The living room was neat throw blankets, folded picture frames lined along the mantel. Most were of April and Dad fishing Mom arranging flowers, even one of the family at the 4th of July barbecue. I scanned the frames carefully. Not a single photo of me. I didn't feel much, just calm. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos for the listing. Living room, dining area, the view from the upstairs bedroom window, the dock at the back of the house where the lake was already catching late afternoon shadows. By sundown, I had a full set. I emailed Daniel and the agent he recommended. The listing was scheduled to go live that coming Monday. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't reach out to April. I wasn't hiding it, but I also wasn't offering an explanation. That Wednesday, I sent one message to the family group chat. You said I never gave this family anything, so I'm giving you exactly what you've always acted like you wanted. Distance, no more tuition, no more emergency bills, no more house. Sell your own memories. I'm out. Then I left the group chat. I blocked their numbers. I logged out of the shared accounts. That was the end of it for me, at least. 2 days later, Claire called. I hadn't told her about the sale. I hadn't planned to. But now her voice was breathless. Rachel, your dad called my mom. He's furious. Something about the lake house being listed. He said you blindsided them. I stayed quiet. Claire lowered her voice. He said you betrayed the family. That word sat there for a moment. I didn't correct her, didn't explain. I didn't feel like I had to. The next morning brought voicemails. One from Mom, 2 minutes long, started with guilt, ended with desperation. April sent 4 texts in a row. Why are you doing this? You're ruining everything. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Dad? You've always been so cold. Then came the email. Dad. Subject line. This isn't over. But for me it was. That Saturday was the buyer's walkthrough. Daniel met me at the house with the listing agent. The couple interested in the place were local retired looking to downsize from their bigger property on the other side of town. They liked the lake, the wraparound porch, the quiet. As I stood waiting on the steps, a familiar SUV rolled up the drive, dust trailing behind. The doors swung open hard. Dad got out first, his shoulders squared like he was ready for a fight. April was pacing, arms crossed, hair pulled back like she hadn't slept. Mom followed a step behind, wrapped in her wool coat. Dad didn't pause. You really think you can just take this from us? I didn't move. It's not yours to take. It never was. He took the steps 2 at a time. We built this house as a family. I shook my head. You decorated it. I paid for it. Every month, every repair, every tax bill. He stopped then, didn't speak, just stared. April stepped forward. Her voice cracked. I've had to drop 2 classes. I don't know how I'm going to graduate. I looked at her. I paid your tuition for 3 years, rent, books, groceries. You never once said thank you. I didn't know what to say, she whispered. "You didn't need words," I said. "You needed a spine." She looked away. Mom's voice broke in next. "You're throwing away your family over money." I looked at her. "I'm letting go of people who only saw me when they needed something. I was never your daughter. I was your ATM with a pulse." She didn't respond. I reached into my folder and handed Dad a copy of the original mortgage agreement, his signature on the line that made it all mine. He opened it, scanned the page, and didn't say a word. Behind me, the couple stepped out of their car. "Beautiful morning," the man said. "Perfect day for a fresh start." I nodded. The house sold on a Thursday. The papers were signed just after noon. I walked out of the title office with the keys still in my coat pocket and a copy of the transfer papers in my bag. Daniel stayed behind to wrap up with the agent. I stepped into the cold and didn't look back. That night, I went home to my apartment and unpacked one bag, the same one I'd brought to the lake house. I made tea, I read, I let the hours pass without checking my phone. But by Saturday morning, a message came through from Claire. No greeting, no explanation, just a screenshot. It was a Reddit post anonymous username, but the story was too familiar to ignore. The headline said something like, "My sister cut me off without warning." The body of the post told the rest. She claimed I'd abandoned the family in the middle of a crisis, stopped paying her tuition, and left her scrambling to stay in school. She said she didn't know what changed, that I'd gone cold, that I was the reason she might not graduate. It was April. I recognized the phrasing, the timing, the way she left out every detail that didn't support her version. The post had already picked up sympathy. Donations were rolling in, comments filled with strangers offering encouragement money, even advice on how to deal with a toxic sibling. Claire sent a follow-up message a few minutes later. "She's monetizing the fallout." I didn't respond right away. I didn't call April. I didn't argue with the post. I just opened a folder I hadn't looked at in months. It was all there, PDF receipts, bank transfers, copies of bookstore invoices, apartment deposits, meal plan charges. 3 years of financial support, all from my accounts, all in my name. Quiet, complete, documented. I organized everything into a private folder and created a public link. Then I returned to the Reddit thread and left one comment. "Before you donate, maybe ask where the previous 7 and 20 went." I didn't include my name. I didn't call her out. I didn't explain. I just let the paper trail speak. By the next morning, the post had been flagged and removed. The comment section turned. The donations stopped. For the first time, the story didn't belong to them. I didn't feel vindicated, just quiet. Over the next few weeks, the calls slowed. The emails stopped. My apartment, just a small loft with old hardwood floors and 2 big windows, became something different. Not a place I returned to after long days. Not a hiding spot. It was mine. I bought a plant, a cactus I named June. I replaced the photos on the fridge with a list of recipes I wanted to try. I started going to the library again, not to escape, just because I liked it there. Nobody dropped by. Nobody called in the middle of the night. There were no emergencies to cover, no surprise bills to sort. And in the absence of all that noise, I noticed something I hadn't in years. I wasn't tired anymore. One Saturday afternoon, Claire showed up at my door with a grocery bag and a small envelope. She didn't stay long, just long enough to drop off homemade soup and a hug. The envelope held a single Polaroid photo. Me and Claire at the lake house, maybe age 9, sitting on the edge of the dock with our feet in the water. We were laughing. There was no one else in the frame. On the back, she'd written, "You've always given more than they ever saw." I stood at the window for a long time after she left, holding that photo in my hand. It was the only one that had ever felt true. A week later, April sent an email. No subject line, just 2 lines of text. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I get it now. I read it twice. Then I archived it. Not out of anger, not to make a point. I just didn't need it anymore. I moved 3 weeks after the sale closed. Not across the country, just far enough that no one could show up unannounced. The new place was quiet. A converted second-floor unit in an older house with creaky floors and wide windows that caught the afternoon light. I didn't bring much with me. No frame photos, no old mail, no leftover birthday cards with generic notes. Just what I needed. And June, the cactus. The building didn't have an elevator, and I liked that. It meant no visitors with heavy luggage. The neighborhood was mostly older couples, a few young families, a corner market with good bread and a bakery that opened early and closed before dinner. I unpacked slow, one drawer at a time. I set up the kitchen first, then the bookshelf. I didn't rush. Most nights I made dinner for one, salmon with lemon or roasted chicken thighs or soup from scratch. I lit a candle on the table even if I didn't sit long. I stopped checking my phone at night. I stopped checking their names. I slept deeper, not just longer deeper. Claire came by one Saturday with a bag of groceries and 2 takeout coffees. She didn't ask questions. Just walked through the apartment like it was already familiar and said, "You did good." She left a grocery list on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear. I kept it there even after I used everything on the list. The emails from April stopped. The family group chat stayed silent. For a while I kept thinking something would happen, a letter, a knocksome last plea to come back. But it never came. The quiet held. One afternoon, I opened a drawer looking for scissors and found the old spare key to the lake house. I held it for a moment, then dropped it into the bottom of a glass jar I kept by the window. Not because I needed it, just because I didn't want to throw it away. The next morning, I went to the park near my apartment. There was a bench by the pond that caught the morning sun. I sat there for almost an hour, watching ducks paddle toward the reeds and back again. There was a boy nearby, maybe 8 or 9, kicking a soccer ball between 2 trees. His father stood off to the side, smiling but not saying much. Every time the boy looked over, the man gave a little nod. Not big, not loud, just enough. That's what I noticed most in those weeks, the way quiet people show up, not with speeches or demands, just steady, just there. I stopped keeping tabs on April's school. I didn't check if she re-enrolled or moved back home. I didn't open the link to her donation page again. If she changed course, I wouldn't know. If she didn't, I wouldn't know that either. And for the first time, I was okay with that. I cleaned the apartment on Sundays, not because it needed it, but because it made me feel settled. I bought cloth napkins. I started making my own salad dressing. Small things, slow things. Then one night in early spring, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't listen right away. It sat in my inbox for 2 days before I finally hit play. It was my father. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Slower. He didn't say much, just that he'd heard I moved, that he didn't know where to send something. And then he said, "I guess you're not coming back." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a sentence that didn't ask for anything. I deleted the message. That Friday, I went downtown to a frame shop and brought the Polaroid Claire had given me, the one of us at the lake house when we were kids. The shop owner helped me pick out a wood frame with a matte finish. I placed it on the small shelf above my desk next to a candle and a stack of blank stationery I hadn't used yet. Every time I passed it, I didn't just see the dock or the lake. I saw who I used to be before I learned how to disappear. It had been nearly 2 months since I moved. Most days passed quietly morning coffee work from home, an evening walk through the neighborhood. I'd settled into a rhythm that didn't include looking back. Until one Sunday afternoon, a knock at the door broke the silence. It wasn't Claire. I hadn't given my new address to anyone else. I looked through the peephole and froze. My mother stood on the porch. Her coat was buttoned all the way up, even though it was warm outside. She held a small brown paper bag in both hands, like she didn't know what else to do with them. I didn't open the door right away. I stood there for a moment, watching her shift from foot to foot. When I finally opened it, I didn't say anything. She looked up. "Rachel," she said softly. I stepped aside. "You can come in for a few minutes." She walked in like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to touch anything. Her eyes moved slowly across the living room, the bookshelf, the small kitchen table with 2 chairs. She didn't sit. "I brought banana bread," she said, lifting the bag. "Your favorite." I thought maybe she stopped herself. I nodded but didn't take the bag. "I'm not hungry." She held it for a few seconds longer, then placed it gently on the counter. "I didn't know where else to find you," she said. "Claire wouldn't tell me. I had to ask one of your old neighbors." I leaned against the back of a chair. "You could have written." I didn't know what to say. We stood in the quiet. I thought maybe she said slowly, we could talk. About the house, about April, about everything. I looked at her. "You didn't come when I left. You didn't call when I stopped paying. You didn't say anything when Dad shouted at me in front of everyone." She nodded. "I know." There was a pause. Then she added, "He shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have let him." I didn't respond. She looked around the room again, as if seeing it might help her understand something. "This place is nice," she said. "Peaceful. I like it." She finally sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "April's back at school. She got some scholarships, took out a loan. She's figuring it out." I waited. "She's angry, still. But I think she's starting to understand." I pulled out one of the chairs and sat across from her. "I didn't come to ask for anything," she said. "I just wanted to see you, to say I'm sorry." There it was, after all this time. She looked older than I remembered. Not just tired, different. Smaller somehow. "Why now?" I asked. She looked at her hands. "Because I thought you'd come back eventually. And when you didn't, I realized I'd built a version of family in my head that wasn't real anymore. Maybe never was." I didn't say anything. She took a breath. "We were never supposed to make you carry so much. That wasn't fair." Her voice trembled slightly on the last word. I looked at the photo shelf across the room, the one with the framed Polaroid of me and Claire at the lake. "I didn't come here to make you feel guilty," she added. "I just wanted you to know I see it now." We sat there for a while, no more talking, just stillness. She eventually stood and walked to the door. "If you ever want to talk again," she said, "you don't have to call, just write. I'll wait." She closed the door behind her. I didn't cry. I didn't rush after her. I stayed in the chair for a long time, watching the shadows shift across the floor. It was late April when I went back to the house I grew up in. The front lawn looked the same, patchy grass, the stone walkway still missing that one loose tile at the bottom step. The mailbox leaned a little more than I remembered. I parked down the street and walked the rest of the way. Claire had told them I was coming. Not for a visit, not for a reunion. I just wanted to say what I hadn't said before, out loud in the place where it started. Dad opened the door before I knocked. He looked older, too. His hair had gone more gray than white, and the set of his shoulders wasn't as square as I remembered. He didn't move aside right away. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. I didn't answer, just waited. He stepped back. "Come in." The house smelled like lemon polish and something baking. Mom must have been trying to make it feel normal. The living room was exactly the same couch, same pictures on the wall. Except this time I noticed what was missing. Still no photos of me. Not one. April was sitting at the dining room table. She looked up but didn't say anything. I stood just inside the entryway, coat still on. "I'm not staying long," I said. I just needed to say something face to face. No one interrupted. For a long time I said, I thought if I just did enough, if I paid, if I helped, if I didn't complain, you'd see me. Not what I gave you. Me. Mom shifted on the couch but still didn't speak. But when you didn't, I told myself it didn't matter. That being useful was enough, until it wasn't. April stood and walked over. Her voice was low. I didn't know how much you were doing. I didn't ask. You didn't want to know, I said. You liked not knowing. She looked down. You're right. Dad moved toward the hall like he couldn't stand still any longer. We never asked for all that. No, I said. You expected it. That's different. He turned back. You walked away from your family. I stepped closer. No, I stopped playing the part you wrote for me. He didn't answer. Mom stood now, too, her voice softer than I expected. What do you want from us, Rachel? I don't want anything I said. That's why I'm here. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for an apology. I just needed to close the door on this. Claire had offered to drive me that day, but I'd come alone. I didn't need backup. I didn't need anyone to witness it. I looked around the room one last time. It wasn't home. Maybe it never had been. I nodded once, said goodbye, and let myself out. Back at the car, I didn't cry. I didn't replay the conversation in my head. I just drove. The streets looked smaller than they used to. The turns easier to remember. The sky was clear. The drive home was quiet. No music. Just the steady hum of the tires on the road and the faint rattle of my grocery bags in the back seat. I didn't rush. I didn't feel anything urgent pulling at me. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had dipped low enough to cast soft shadows across the sidewalk. Inside the apartment still smelled like the lavender candle I'd lit before I left. June, my little cactus, was leaning slightly toward the window, like she always did by mid-afternoon. I set my keys in the dish by the door and slipped off my shoes. Then I sat on the couch, not for any reason, just to be still. That night, I slept without waking. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from my parents. Not a call, not a letter. April sent one more email, this one longer. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for anything. Just shared that she was graduating in the fall and hoped I might come. I read it, sat with it for a while, and then closed it. I didn't delete it. I just let it stay where it was. Claire came by with peach scones and a new jigsaw puzzle. We sat at the kitchen table for hours, working through the corners first. She didn't bring up the visit to the old house, and I didn't either. We didn't need to. One morning in early June, I took a walk along the trail behind the apartment. It led past a row of old maple trees and ended at a small overlook with a bench. I hadn't sat there before, but this time I did. The lake in front of me was still. Not glassy, just quiet. It reminded me of the lake house, but not in a painful way. Just a distant echo. I thought about everything I'd given over the years, the hours, the money, the effort. And for a long time I believed that giving without limits was love, that being needed meant being valued. But standing up for yourself doesn't mean walking away from love. Sometimes it means walking back toward it on your own terms. I didn't burn any bridges. I just stopped carrying them on my back. People always say families are complicated. I think what they really mean is that love, when it comes with conditions, feels more like debt. And the hardest part is learning you don't have to keep paying for a seat at a table that's never made room for you. Peace doesn't always arrive with an apology. Sometimes it comes when you decide you're done waiting for one. I still keep that photo Claire gave me and her on the dock legs, in the water, heads tipped back laughing. That girl didn't know what was coming. But she made it. We both did. If any part of this story feels familiar to you, if you've ever poured yourself into a place that didn't pour back, just know you're not alone. And you're allowed to choose peace, even if it looks like distance. Thanks for listening. If this story spoke to you, I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. And if you haven't already, feel free to follow along for more stories like this one. Take care.